This happened to me about 5 years ago, the kind of stupid little thing you tell yourself you'll forget until it refuses to leave you alone. I still don't know what to call it, prank, coincidence, something worse, and that's the part that makes me keep replaying it in my head. I live in a small, sleepy neighborhood. Nothing special, just a grid of streets with porches and maple trees. I work from home, so I like to be the house with the porch light on and the big bowl of candy on Halloween. It's dumb, but handing out candy gives the night a purpose. My routine was simple. Get home from work, set the bowl out, leave a lamp on in the living room, put the radio on low, and sit on the couch with a mug of coffee and the occasional newspaper until kids started showing up. The porch light buzzed a little because the bulb was old. Kids and parents would come and go. After a while, the bowl was usually half empty, and the night felt soft and ordinary. This particular Halloween was cool and clear, leaves making that dry scraping sound underfoot. It was one of those nights where every house smelled like cinnamon or smoke from someone's backyard grill. The usual stream of groups came by: pirates, superheroes, a convincing dinosaur that made a little kid cry, and I handed out candy, chatted a little, everything normal. Around 10, things slowed down. I was about to turn off the porch light when someone came up my walk. She was maybe 7 or 8, walking alone. That alone was odd. Most kids at that time had at least a parent trailing, but I live on a street where older siblings will send younger ones on short treks, so I didn't think much of it. She wore an old-fashioned dress, like something you would see in a thrift store or in a photo from the 70s. No mask, no makeup, just a plain dress and bare legs. Her hair was loose, long enough to look messy in the wind. She stood on the steps and stared at the candy bowl without smiling. Her hands were clasped in front of her like she was holding something invisible. I held out the bowl like you do and said, "Happy Halloween." She took a single piece, one of those small chocolate bars, and whispered, very quietly, "Thank you." Her voice was normal, a little breathy, like she'd been running. She didn't say trick or treat. She just left without looking back. It wasn't until she was a few yards down the street that I realized I hadn't heard footsteps after she turned the corner. I thought maybe she was fast, that the sound of leaves swallowed her up, that there was a car or someone calling out. Normal explanations. Still, it left a little hollow in my chest, like the sound of a TV when the picture fogs. I forgot about it by the time the bowl was empty. I closed up, turned off the lamp, and went to bed. Later that night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the smell of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. My apartment is on the first floor. The bedroom window faces the street. I assumed it was someone walking home with a cigarette and closed my eyes, but then I heard the porch gate squeak. That sound should have alarmed me, but for some reason I stayed still, listening. The squeak sounded soft, like someone was easing the gate with a hand, and then it stopped. Then there was the faint sound of tiny feet on my porch steps. Not a stamp, not sneakers, just light, careful feet. They crossed the porch, then paused, like someone standing right at the door, listening. I could have gotten up, flipped on the hallway light, looked through the peephole. Instead, I lay there, frozen, watching the line of the bedroom ceiling, telling myself it was one of the neighbors, maybe a kid who got separated from a parent. The next morning, I found a smear of mud on the doormat, a small crescent where a heel would be, and a single tiny footprint on the threshold inside the door. Barefoot, maybe 4 inches long. That was the loop where my brain started arguing with itself. I live alone. My door has always been locked, and I lock it every time I leave the house. I couldn't account for how a barefoot child would get inside without me hearing more than a gate creak. I asked around in the neighborhood, the usual, "Did you see a little girl?" And people shrugged. Some said they saw a kid in a white dress. Someone thought it was a neighbor's daughter. No one had a real answer. I didn't mention the footprint to anyone. Some part of me wanted it to just be a prank, nothing to dig into. But as the days passed, I started noticing small things unsettling, not because they were loud, but because they were oddly intimate. A crumpled wrapper under the couch, I was sure hadn't been there. A tiny smudge of dirt on the inside of the back door. Once, a small strand of hair on my pillow that wasn't mine, light brown, thin. I remembered every cat hair and every dust mote in my apartment, and this didn't fit. I would clean, and the next day there'd be something else. A tiny handprint on the inside of the bathroom window. A single shoelace tied neatly and left on the stair like a marker. I set up a cheap motion camera in my hallway. I told myself it was for peace of mind. The camera felt like a talisman. It was an ugly plastic box that blinked a blue light, the kind of thing you buy on sale at a hardware store. The first night it captured nothing. The second night I went to bed early because the thought of being awake made me look for sounds that were there. I woke up around 2:30 to the same gate squeak, but I forced myself to stay awake this time. I watched the live feed on my phone. Nothing. The porch light was out, the street empty. I started to relax until I noticed the blue light on the camera had blinked twice, then paused, then blinked again. Nothing showed on the screen, no one on the porch, no shadow. I told myself the sensor had tripped because of the wind. I told myself a lot of things. Later I watched the footage. The part right before the light blinked had a faint smear of static, like an old TV trying to focus. Then another frame where something passed just beyond the lens, a small shape that the camera couldn't quite lock onto. When I enlarged it, it turned into a blur. Nothing I could swear was a child or a person. The timing weighed on me more than the image. 2:31 a.m., the same time the gate squeaked the night before. I started keeping my keys in my pocket at night. I kept the television on low in the bedroom, and I'd tell myself that would be enough. Weeks went by. The extra things kept coming. A paper doll taped to the underside of my kitchen table, a page torn. From a coloring book in the trash can with a picture of a house drawn exactly like mine. Front door, one window, a little stick figure on the porch with hair hanging over its face. The figure had scratches along one arm that didn't look like a child at all, more like a jagged pattern. I hated how my stomach would flip when I looked at that picture. I would pick it up, crumple it, drop it in the bin, and find it again somewhere else. One November afternoon, about 2 weeks after Halloween, I found a note slid under my door. It was small, hastily folded, and the writing looked like it had been done by someone who was still learning. It read, "Thank you for the candy." No signature, no other marks. I didn't call the police. It felt absurd to tell cops I was getting anonymous notes from a child. What were they going to do? Patrol the neighborhood for spooky dresses? They'd think I was making it up. And telling my neighbors felt too close to admitting I couldn't handle my own house. The thing that finally made me stop sleeping in my bed wasn't a sound or a picture, though there were plenty more of those. It was the small chair. One morning I found a tiny wooden chair, about a foot tall, sitting right at the foot of my bed. It wasn't something a prankster would leave casually. It was the kind of toy you find in an antique store, varnish worn smooth in the places where a child's hands would touch it. There was a small depressed ring in the seat, like someone had been sitting there for a while and then stood up. The room smelled faintly of damp hair and old paper. On the chair, someone had placed a piece of candy, the wrapper folded and tucked under the candy, like it was waiting for me to pick it up. I took the chair to the alley behind the building and left it there. I thought removing it would end the nightly things. It didn't. If anything, it only grew quieter and more deliberate. Items would appear in places I couldn't imagine, a child reaching like a little scrap of ribbon tucked into the pocket of my winter coat, which I had hung on a high peg. Things stopped being hurried. There were no more scribbled notes, no more half-laughing children's steps. It felt like someone was stopping by to sit and watch the house the way a person watches TV late at night when everyone else is asleep. Weeks turned into months. I moved the camera to the living room and rewired the lock to a new deadbolt. Nothing big happened for a while. I told myself to get on with my life. I dated a little, went out, and started to forget. Then another Halloween came. This happened to me about 5 years ago. It's one of those small, stupid things you tell yourself you'll forget until it keeps coming back, like a song stuck under your skin. I still don't have a name for it. Prank, coincidence, something worse. But not knowing is the worst part. I live in a slow little neighborhood. Grid streets, porches, maples that slam the sidewalks with leaves in the fall. I work from home, so on Halloween, I like to keep my porch light on and a big bowl of candy out front. It's dumb and kind of pathetic, but handing out candy gives the night a shape. My setup was always the same. Lamp on in the living room, RADIO low, a mug of coffee, the porch light buzzing because the bulb was old. Kids would come in waves, pirates, Cape heroes. The one year, a convincing dinosaur that sent a toddler into tears. People would laugh on the steps, parents would gossip, the night would feel ordinary. That night was cool and clear, the kind where every house smelled like cinnamon or someone's grill. I was about to turn the porch light off when a little girl came up my walk. She couldn't have been more than 7, 8 maybe. She walked alone. That was the first odd thing. Most kids came with a parent or an older sibling at least. She wore a plain dress, old looking, like something from a thrift shop or an old photograph. No mask, no costume, just bare legs and hair loose in the wind. She stood on the top step and looked at the candy bowl without smiling. Her hands were clenched together, like she was holding something thin and invisible. I offered the bowl and said, "Happy Halloween." She picked a small chocolate and said quietly, "Thank you. No. Trick or treat, no show." Her voice was steady, a little out of breath like she'd been running. She walked away without looking back. Halfway down the block, I realized I hadn't heard her feet on the leaves after she turned the corner. Leaves are loud in October, and even sneakers have that shuffle. I told myself she was fast. I told myself a parent called to her. It left a small hollow, though, like an empty room in my chest. I forgot about her until the bowl was empty. I closed up, turned the lamp off, went to bed. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to cigarette smoke and some sweet perfume drifting through my bedroom window. My place is on the first floor. The window faces the street. I assumed a neighbor was walking by. Then the gate on my porch squeaked, slow and careful, like someone easing it open with a hand. The sound stopped. Tiny, soft footsteps crossed the porch and paused at my front door. Not the thud of sneakers, it was careful, light. I lay there rigid and told myself it was probably a kid who'd gotten separated that whoever it was had left. I did not get up. I should have checked the peephole. I didn't. In the morning, there was a smear of mud on the doormat, a small crescent where a heel might press. Inside, on the threshold, was a single barefoot print, maybe 4 inches long, toes splayed. I locked the door every time. I live alone. I tried to explain it away. I asked people on my block and they shrugged. Someone said they'd seen a girl in an old dress. Someone else thought it was a prank. No one knew. After that, little things started happening. Not loud, not obvious, the kind of details that crawl under your skin because they feel private. A crumpled candy wrapper under the couch I swore wasn't there. A smudge of dirt on the inside of the back door. A strand of hair on my pillow that wasn't mine, thin and a light brown. A tiny handprint on the inside of the bathroom window, the size of a child's palm. A shoelace tied and left under my chandelier like a marker. They were all small enough that I could pretend. I cleaned obsessively. I would vacuum, scrub, put things back, and still wait to find something new the next day. It felt like someone learning the limits of my house. I bought a cheap motion camera, the clunky plastic kind with a blue LED. I set it in the hall and told myself it would help. The first night showed nothing. The second night I watched the live feed on my phone because I couldn't sleep. At 2:31 a.m., the camera's light blinked twice, paused, blinked again. The footage around that time had a thin smear of static, like an old television trying to focus. One frame had a blur beyond the lens, a shape the camera couldn't lock onto. When I zoomed in, it just dissolved into pixels. Still, the timing matched when the gate had squeaked the week before. He started keeping my keys on me, sleeping with the TV low on to make noise. I changed the deadbolt. Little gifts kept showing up in weird places. A paper doll taped under the kitchen table, a torn coloring page in the trash with a crude drawing of my house. Front, door, one window, a stick figure on the porch with hair hanging over its face. The figure had scratches down one arm, jagged lines that didn't look like a child diddle so much as an imitation of something someone else had seen. Then, 2 weeks after Halloween, a tiny folded note slid under my door. "Thank you for the candy. No name." The handwriting was childish and messy. I never called the police. There's no good way to explain notes from a child and little gifts on your porch without sounding like you re-asking for a welfare check on your house. I didn't want my neighbors to think I had something weird going on. One morning, I found a small wooden chair at the foot of my bed. It was about a foot tall, smooth where hands might have polished it, the kind of toy you'd find in an old attic. There was a shallow ring worn into the seat, like someone had been sitting there a long time and then stood up. On it, folded neatly, was a candy wrapper. The chair smelled faintly of damp paper and old hair. I walked it to the alley and left it there, thinking if I removed it, maybe the visits would stop. They didn't. If anything, the items became quieter, more careful. Things appeared in places no child could reach. A scrap of ribbon tucked into the pocket of my winter coat up on a high peg, a tiny smear of lipstick on the inside rim of my coffee mug. It felt less like a prank and more like someone visiting the way you visit a house you haunt. Not loud, not brutish, patient. The following Halloween, I put the bowl out again because I didn't know what else to do. The night was ordinary until midnight when I heard a soft humming note from the living room, not a song I could place. Just a tuneless hum. I paused on the stairs and listened until it stopped. In the morning, there was a small carved pumpkin on my couch. It was cleaned, polished inside, a neat votive candle set in the center. No footprints, no note, no sign of how it got there. It sat like someone had set it down and gone. Months later, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a chair scrape on hardwood behind me. A whisper, right behind my ear, the breath of it like someone leaning in. "Thank you." The voice was the same, small and ordinary. I spun with the light already on. The room was empty. No chair, no pumpkin, no print. The hush that followed felt loud. I moved 2 months after that. Sensible reasons, I told people. Closer to work, better landlord. You don't move houses to escape a feeling, I told myself. The thing slowed for a while. I stopped sleeping with everything on. Then, a year later, my old neighbor stopped me on the street and said, quietly, "Sometimes I saw a little girl on your steps." She looked ... sad. She shrugged like it was nothing. Nobody ever knew who she was. I liked that answer for a time because it was clean, anonymous, and explainable. But the thing that kept pulling me back wasn't the objects or the notes. It was small reminders, smells and sounds that cut through whatever else I was doing. I'm making coffee, and suddenly there's cigarette smoke in the kitchen. I'm washing dishes, and I find a thin strand of hair in my sweater. Little tracers that say someone else has passed through this life in a way that isn't visible on a security feed. The last straw was a picture sent to my phone from an unknown number. It was low-light, grainy. A corner of my old bedroom, my bed, the lamp, and beside it the small wooden chair. The seat had the same shallow indentation I remembered, but the chair was empty. No caption, no text, just the photo. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't call the number. I put the phone face down and sat in the dark for a long time. Tonight the Halloween lights are still on down the street. I have a new apartment now, further away, and locks and cameras and a louder radio. I tell myself I'm safe. I tell myself I'm over it. But tonight, sitting here, I heard the gate squeak. You know, Halloween has always been one of those nights where everything feels just a little off. The air gets crisp, kids run around in costumes, and for a few hours, the world pretends to be something it's not. But sometimes, that pretense slips, and what you're left with is something real. Something you can't explain away. This happened to me last year in a quiet suburb just outside of Chicago. I'm sharing it now because, well, I need to get it out. Maybe someone else has experienced this too. It was October 31st, and I just moved into this new neighborhood a couple months prior. Nothing fancy, row of identical houses, families with kids, the usual. I wasn't big on decorating, but I figured I'd hand out some candy to fit in. My house was at the end of the cul-de-sac, right next to this older guy named Mr. Harlan. He kept to himself mostly. I'd wave when I saw him mowing his lawn, but he'd just nod and look away. His place was always dark, no porch light, no jack-o'-lanterns. That Halloween, though, something was different. As the sun went down, I noticed his windows flickering. Not like candles or anything festive, more like someone was turning lights on and off inside, room by room. Pause. It was subtle at first. I shrugged it off. Probably just getting ready for trick-or-treaters. Around 7 p.m., the streets started filling up. Kids in superhero outfits, parents trailing behind with flashlights. I sat on my porch with a bowl of Snickers, handing them out, chatting with the neighbors. Nice costume, I'd say, or stay safe out there. But every few minutes, my eyes would drift over to Mr. Harlan's house. The flickering had stopped, but now his front door was cracked open just a sliver. No light coming from inside, though. Just darkness, and ... was that a sound? Like a faint scratching, maybe? Coming from his yard? I strained to listen over the laughter of the kids, but it faded. Probably nothing. Leaves in the wind, right? As the night went on, the crowds thinned out. By 9 p.m., it was mostly teenagers wandering around, egging each other on. I was about to call it a night when I heard it again, that scratching. Louder this time, like nails on wood. It was definitely coming from next door. I stood up, peering over the low fence that separated our yards. Mr. Harlan's door was still ajar, but now I could see a shadow moving inside. Not a person, exactly ... More like a shape, low to the ground. Pause. I called out, "Hey, Mr. Harlan, everything okay over there?" No answer. Just silence. Then the scratching stopped abruptly, like whatever it was had heard me. I should have gone inside. Locked the door and forgotten about it. But you know how curiosity gets the better of you on nights like this. I grabbed my phone for the flashlight and hopped the fence. His yard was overgrown, weeds up to my knees, and the air smelled ... off, like damp earth mixed with something metallic. I approached the door slowly, shining the light through the crack. "Mr. Harlan?" I said again, softer this time. Still nothing. But as I got closer, I heard breathing. Heavy, ragged breath from inside. Not human, though. More like an animal panting after a chase. I pushed the door open a bit more. It creaked on its hinges. And that yes when I saw the hallway. Empty, except for scratches all along the walls. Long, deep gouges like claws had been dragged across the paint. The floor was littered with what looked like candy wrappers, torn open and scattered. And further in, toward the living room, those lights were flickering again. On, off, on, off. Each time they flashed, I caught glimpses of movement, something darting just out of sight. Pause. My heart was pounding now. I whispered, "Hello?" The breathing stopped. Then, from the darkness at the end of the hall, came a low growl, not a dog. Not anything I'd ever heard before. I backed up, tripping over my own feet, and that's when I noticed the footprints in the dirt outside his door. Small ones, like children's shoes, but they weren't leading away from the house. They were all heading in. Dozens of them, overlapping, as if a group of kids had rushed inside and never come out. I shone my light on them, and my stomach dropped. Mixed in with the footprints were smears of something dark. Mud? Or ... No, I didn't want to think about that. Panicking, I ran back to my yard, dialing 911 as I went. "There's something wrong at my neighbor's house," I told the operator. "I think someone's hurt. They said they'd send someone over." I waited on my porch, watching his door. It was still open, but now the flickering lights had stopped. The whole place was pitch black. No sounds, no movement. Just that uneasy quiet that makes your skin crawl. The cops showed up about 20 minutes later, 2 officers with flashlights knocking on his door. They went inside, and I could hear them calling out. Minutes ticked by. Pause. When they came out, one of them walked over to me. "Sir, there's no one home," he said. "House is empty. Looks like your neighbor left in a hurry. Doors unlocked. Lights off." I told them about the scratches, the breathing, the footprints. They nodded, but I could tell they thought I was overreacting. "Probably kids playing a prank," the other officer said. "Halloween brings out the weirdos. We'll keep an eye on it." They left, and I went inside, bolting my door. But sleep didn't come easy that night. Every creak in the house made me jump, and around midnight I heard it again. That scratching. This time from my own backyard. I peeked through the blinds, and there it was. A single light flickering in Mr. Harlan's window. On, off, on, off, like a signal. Inviting something or someone in. The next morning, I checked the news. Nothing about missing kids or anything unusual. I even knocked on Mr. Harlan's door myself. No answer. His car was still in the driveway, but the house felt abandoned. I haven't seen him since. The neighborhood whispers about it now and then. Old man probably skipped town, but no one else looked too closely. And on quiet nights, especially around this time of year, I still hear that scratching. Faint, like it's testing the edges of my own door. Pause, waiting. I've thought about moving, but part of me wonders if it's already too late. Because last week, as I was handing out candy again, I noticed something. A group of kids in costumes laughing as they approached my porch. One of them, a little girl in a witch hat, stopped and stared at Mr. Harlan's house. "Don't go there," she said, her voice so small. "The lights call you in." I asked what she meant, but she just took her candy and ran off. Now, every time the porch light flickers, I wonder if it's starting again. If whatever was in that house is still out there, blending in with the costumes and the shadows. Waiting for the next Halloween to open its door just a little wider. Long pause. If you're out there tonight, handing out treats, keep your eyes on the dark houses. And whatever you do, don't listen to the scratching.